My presentation, as indicated, is South Africa trade, and what I'm looking for, what I looked at is the current nature of South Africa's trade with Africa, so that I can see the current foundation which is already in place for South Africa to build on in the African Continental Free Trade Area, and also the implications of this foundation which is there in place for South Africa's trade in the African Continental Free Trade Area. And the theoretical framework which I used is the National Trading Partner Hypothesis, which says that for a free trade area to reinforce existing trade relations, 4 things have to be in place. That is, 1, there has to be initial high volume of trade between prospective members. Secondly, there have to be strong trade linkages between prospective member states. And thirdly, there has to be strong and improving complementary or competitive trade structures, and the prospective members have to have diverse comparative advantages. So I examined all these 4 factors in the context of South Africa, and the methodology and the mathematical models which I used, which try and look at these 4 areas of 4 factors, is the Trade Complementarity Index, and I used also the Revealed Trade Barrier Index and the Bilateral Trade Intensity Index. And then also look at the trade integration dimension of South Africa, so as to see the foundation which is there currently, which South Africa can build on. The results with regard to trade complementarity, with regard to South Africa's export structures or export offers to Africa, there's a very high match as indicated by the index, which lies between 71.8 and 81.3. And what drives this high match is South Africa's manufactured exports to Africa. So South Africa's exports in manufactured goods highly match Africa's import demand of such. Then from the perspective of Africa, we can see that there's a moderate match between Africa's export structure to South Africa's import demand. And what drives this moderate match is low value-added products, low value-added manufactured products from Africa into South Africa. And over the years, we've seen that there has been trade. Africa's export structure is becoming more and more complementary to South Africa's import structure or import demands. And the implications of these results is that once we have our African Continental Free Trade Area in place, then South Africa will be able to exploit more fully these existing trade complementarities for mutual benefit. And as per the National Trading Hypothesis, the potential free trade area members who have to utilize these complementary and competitive trade structures and benefit more fully. Then the results on market access, which are indicated by the Revealed Trade Barrier Index. My results show that resource-based manufactured products, which are agro-based and other resource-based manufactured and low technology manufactured products, excluding textiles and medium technology manufactured products from South Africa, they easily access Africa's markets. But the products which are discriminated against by African countries which emanate from South Africa are South Africa's high-tech manufactured products. They experience discriminatory trade barriers. But now with the African Continental Free Trade Area in place and with these trade barriers reduced, South Africa is going to be able to access Africa's markets more easily, and these high technology manufactured products which are currently being discriminated against to be able to access these markets, and therefore South Africa will be in a better position to develop or to utilize or to develop its industrial base further and be able to pursue new and dynamic areas of comparative advantage. Then the results with regard to linkages between South Africa and various regional groups in Africa, and I selected only 5 regional groups. But the results show that South Africa has very weak trade linkages with the Arab Maghreb region, as indicated by the index, which is negative. So it has very weak trade linkages with that. Then with the ECCAS, it has moderate to high trade linkages, and with ECOWAS, East African Community, and SADC, South Africa has strong linkages with those regional groups. So that's the current state of the trade linkages between South Africa and these regional groups. Now, with the African Continental Free Trade Area in place, and the tariffs and the non-tariff barriers and tariff barriers are reduced, these currently trade linkages are going to be made even stronger, such that South Africa will be able to harness more fully current and new trade complementarities, and also to be able to explore options or possibilities of joint production, also to develop stronger regional value and engaging in regional value chains, and also to develop new and dynamic areas of comparative advantage, because these trade linkages will be strengthened once you have an African Continental Free Trade Area which is functioning as per the natural trading partner hypothesis. The results with regard to the extent to which South Africa's trade is integrated in Africa, the results as indicated: share of exports, shares of imports, share of intra-Africa trade, as well as the continuous tariff reduction by South Africa. South Africa's trade currently is well integrated in Africa's trade, and the opening up of the markets with the African Continental Free Trade Area is going to make South Africa even more integrated within Africa, and be able to participate a lot more in intra-Africa trade. Now, my results with regard to access to trade opportunities. Whilst South Africa has a strong base on which to build on with the coming into effect of the African Continental Free Trade Area, there are potential challenges which South Africa still has to grapple with regard to having to access all these markets in Africa. For example, the first challenge which is there is the diversity of official languages, because we don't have one official language in Africa. We have Arabic, English, French, Portuguese, Spanish, Swahili, and all these, the documents with regard to trade between South Africa and all these other African countries have to be translated into all these languages, and that can be a constraint in trade. The second challenge is the different institutional arrangements and abilities or lack thereof to effectively monitor and enforce the implementation of the provisions of the African Continental Free Trade Area to facilitate trade. While South Africa has strong institutional arrangements and abilities that may be lacking in these other African countries with which South Africa has to trade with and to access their markets, and that will have negative implications with regard to South Africa's ability to access those markets. The other issue is of multiple currencies between African countries, because with the African Continental Free Trade Area, each and every country will still maintain its own currency, and that can constrain the accessibility of these markets or accessing trade potentials in these markets by South Africa. Then the other one is harmonization of institutional barriers and trade facilitation measures, because these are still kind of country dependent. Each country tends to have its own trade facilitation measures, and there is a need to have these to be synchronized for countries to be able to access each other's markets. The other bottleneck which is there is infrastructure and communication. which can hinder accessing other markets. The other challenge which would be is competitive business environment, because once you have the African Continental Free Trade Area in place, markets are going to open up. While South Africa has a solid foundation so far with regard to its trade with Africa, it is going to face competition from countries like Egypt, who also have a strong industrial base, and therefore that can cause, that's going to pose competition to South Africa. Then conclusions, yes, South Africa has a solid base, trade base in Africa, which it can build on and utilize to expand its trade and consolidate its trade in Africa with the African Continental Free Trade Area. The limitations of these studies that the African Continental Free Trade Area is still 5 years old, and therefore there is need for time to pass so that we can see the concrete dynamics of trade within the African Free Trade Area and how if South Africa is going to leverage this particular base or foundation which it has established already in Africa, in its trade with Africa, for mutual benefit. Thank you.